Beloved, hear this truth with clarity and conviction. Nothing in your life is supposed to be random. Every repeated pattern carries a message. Every recurring struggle reveals a deeper dimension of warfare. And every cycle of failure is an invitation for divine intervention. Many people are not defeated because they are weak. They are defeated because they have not yet understood the spiritual laws that govern progress, success, and destiny. There are individuals who have labored sincerely, prayed faithfully, and worked tirelessly, yet they find themselves returning to the same place again and again. They rise with hope, but somehow fall back into the same struggles. They start with passion, but end in frustration. They dream of greatness, but wake up to disappointment. This is not coincidence. This is a cycle, and every cycle has a spiritual explanation. Cycles are not accidents. They are messages written in repetition. When something happens once, it may be coincidence, but when it happens again and again, it reveals a pattern that must be understood. Many people suffer not because they lack strength, intelligence, or opportunity, but because they have never taken time to discern the spiritual meaning behind the cycles that shape their lives. A cycle is a repeated experience that seems to trap a person in the same outcomes regardless of effort. It can appear in finances, relationships, career, health, emotions, or spiritual life. Until the meaning of a cycle is understood, it will continue to repeat itself with stubborn persistence. To understand cycles, you must first realize that life operates on laws, not wishes. Just as seasons follow predictable patterns in nature, spiritual and personal experiences often follow hidden laws. When a person repeatedly experiences failure, delay, rejection, or stagnation, it is not always because of bad luck. Often it is because there is an unseen principle at work. Sometimes the cycle is the result of inherited patterns, belief systems, habits, and mindsets passed down through families and environments. Sometimes it is the consequence of wrong foundations built on fear, ignorance, or deception. Sometimes it is the manifestation of spiritual battles that demand spiritual understanding. A cycle becomes dangerous when it is normalized. When people begin to accept repeated failure as their identity, they lose the courage to challenge it. They begin to say, this is how my life has always been, or nothing ever works for me. These statements are not just words, they are declarations that empower the cycle to continue. The moment a person accepts a negative pattern as destiny, they surrender their authority over it. But cycles are not destiny. They are signals that something must be confronted, corrected, or transformed. There are cycles that are visible and cycles that are invisible. Visible cycles are easy to identify. Repeated financial collapse, recurring relationship breakdowns, constant career setbacks, or endless frustration despite hard work. Invisible cycles are more subtle. Fear of success, self-sabotage, chronic doubt, emotional instability, or an unconscious attraction to failure. These invisible cycles often sustain the visible ones. A person may pray for breakthrough, but if their mind is programmed to expect failure, they unconsciously reproduce the very outcomes they are trying to escape. Understanding the spiritual meaning of cycles requires humility and awareness. It demands that a person look beyond surface events and ask deeper questions. Why does this keep happening to me? What patterns exist in my choices, reactions, and beliefs? What spiritual or psychological roots sustain this repetition? Many people want immediate deliverance without understanding. They want change without insight. But lasting transformation begins with revelation. When light enters a dark room, darkness does not argue, it disappears. In the same way, when understanding enters a life, destructive cycles begin to lose their power. There are cycles that originate from personal choices. Every decision carries seeds of consequence. Repeated wrong choices produce repeated negative outcomes. When a person refuses to learn from past mistakes, they unconsciously create a loop of failure. But there are also cycles that originate from environments. Growing up in an atmosphere of limitation, fear, or hopelessness can shape a person's expectations and behaviors. Without intentional renewal of the mind, people often reproduce the same struggles they observed in others. Beyond psychological and environmental factors, there are cycles that have spiritual roots. Spiritual cycles are sustained by unseen influences that resist progress and distort destiny. These cycles thrive in ignorance. When a person lacks spiritual discernment, they may fight symptoms instead of addressing roots. They may change locations, relationships, or careers, yet carry the same pattern wherever they go. This is why some people escape one situation only to meet the same problem in a different form. The cycle has not ended because its source has not been confronted. Understanding cycles also means recognizing that not all repetition is negative. There are positive cycles as well. Cycles of growth, favor, wisdom, and success. These cycles are produced by alignment with truth, discipline, and divine principles. Just as negative cycles can trap a person in failure, positive cycles can propel a person into consistent victory. The difference lies in the foundations that sustain them. When a person aligns their thoughts, actions, and spiritual life with higher principles, they begin to experience repeated progress instead of repeated defeat. The greatest danger is not failure itself, but ignorance of its meaning. When a person understands why something repeats, they gain power over it. Awareness is the first step toward liberation. The moment you realize that your struggles are not random, you begin to search for answers instead of excuses. You begin to confront patterns instead of tolerating them. You begin to see yourself not as a victim of cycles, but as a candidate for transformation. Every cycle is a call to awakening. It is a divine alarm that something in your life must change. It is an invitation to rise above repetition and step into purpose. When understanding dawns, cycles lose their mystery. When wisdom is applied, cycles lose their grip. And when spiritual authority is activated, cycles of failure are replaced by cycles of victory, clarity, and fulfillment. Repeated failure is rarely accidental. It is often the visible expression of deeper roots that operate beneath the surface of life. When a person repeatedly experiences setbacks despite effort, prayer, and determination, it is essential to look beyond the symptoms and examine the underlying causes. Failure is not always the absence of ability. Many gifted, intelligent, and hardworking people still find themselves trapped in cycles of disappointment. The true tragedy is not failure itself, but the ignorance of its roots. One of the most powerful roots of repeated failure is the mind. The mind is the control center of destiny. Long before failure manifests outwardly, it often exists inwardly as beliefs, expectations, and mental programs. When a person subconsciously believes that success is impossible, they unknowingly sabotage opportunities that could change their lives. Fear of failure, fear of success, low self-worth, and negative self-talk can quietly shape decisions and behaviors. A person may pray for breakthrough, yet their mind rejects the possibility of it. In such a state, failure becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Another root of repeated failure is lack of knowledge. Many people fail not because they are cursed, but because they are uninformed. Every area of life is governed by principles. Financial success, healthy relationships, leadership, spiritual growth, and personal development all operate according to laws. When these laws are ignored, violated, or misunderstood, failure becomes inevitable. Passion without knowledge leads to frustration. Effort without understanding leads to exhaustion. Prayer without wisdom often produces temporary relief instead of lasting transformation. There is also the root of wrong foundations. Foundations determine the strength of any structure. When the foundation of a person's life is built on deception, compromise, laziness, or unstable values, failure is only a matter of time. Many people want to build greatness on weak foundations. They desire quick success without discipline, recognition without preparation, and rewards without responsibility. But life does not reward shortcuts. Whatever is built on unstable foundations will eventually collapse, no matter how impressive it appears. Another deep root of repeated failure is environment. Environment shapes perception, habits, and expectations. A person raised in an atmosphere of limitation, fear, or negativity often internalizes those patterns. Without conscious effort to break free, they reproduce the same struggles they observed in others. When everyone around a person thinks small, celebrates mediocrity, or resists growth, it becomes difficult to pursue excellence. Sometimes failure is not caused by lack of potential, but by the absence of supportive environments that nurture growth. Beyond psychological and environmental factors, there are spiritual roots that cannot be ignored. Some failures persist because they are sustained by spiritual resistance. When a person is disconnected from spiritual truth, they become vulnerable to confusion, deception, and stagnation. Spiritual emptiness often manifests as persistent frustration in physical life. When a person lacks spiritual alignment, they may work hard yet remain stuck. They may move constantly yet make no real progress. This is because true advancement requires alignment not only with principles but with purpose. Another root of repeated failure is disobedience to inner convictions and divine guidance. Many people know what they should do but refuse to do it. They ignore warnings, delay important decisions, and resist change. Over time, these small acts of disobedience accumulate into large consequences. Failure in such cases is not sudden. It is the result of gradual neglect of truth. When a person consistently ignores wisdom, they unconsciously design their own setbacks. There is also the root of unresolved emotional wounds. Pain, bitterness, resentment, and unforgiveness can imprison a person in invisible chains. Emotional wounds distort perception and decision making. A person who has been betrayed may unconsciously sabotage relationships. A person who has experienced rejection may avoid opportunities that require visibility. These inner wounds become silent architects of failure. Until they are healed, progress remains limited. Another significant root of repeated failure is lack of discipline. Discipline is the bridge between desire and achievement. Many people have dreams but lack consistency. They start with enthusiasm but abandon their efforts when challenges arise. Without discipline, talent is wasted and potential remains dormant. Repeated failure often occurs not because of external opposition, but because of internal inconsistency. Repeated failure is rarely caused by a single factor. It is usually the result of interconnected roots. mental, emotional, environmental, spiritual, and structural. To end cycles of failure, one must be willing to confront these roots honestly. It is not enough to pray against failure. One must understand why it exists. Transformation begins when a person stops blaming circumstances and starts examining foundations. When roots are exposed, they can be uprooted. When truth replaces ignorance, wisdom replaces confusion. And when alignment replaces disorder, cycles of failure begin to break, giving way to cycles of growth, clarity, and lasting success. Revelation is the difference between struggle and mastery. Many people pray, work, and strive, yet remain trapped in cycles of limitation because they lack one crucial element: divine insight. Without revelation, a person may fight the wrong battles, apply the wrong solutions, and misunderstand the true nature of their challenges. Revelation is not merely information, it is illumination that unveils hidden truths and exposes unseen realities. When revelation comes, confusion gives way to clarity, and stagnation gives way to movement. A person can possess knowledge yet lack revelation. Knowledge is accumulated through learning, but revelation is imparted through deep understanding and spiritual sensitivity. Knowledge tells you what is happening. Revelation tells you why it is happening and what must be done about it. This is why some people read books, attend seminars, and gather advice, yet remain stuck. They have information but lack insight. They know many things, but they do not understand the core issue shaping their destiny. Divine revelation has the power to break hidden patterns, because patterns thrive in darkness. Anything that remains hidden retains power. Cycles of failure, delay, fear, and frustration often persist because their roots are concealed. When light shines on these roots, they lose their grip. Revelation exposes what logic cannot see and what human reasoning cannot decode. It reveals whether a struggle is psychological, emotional, structural, or spiritual. Without revelation, people treat symptoms instead of causes, and the cycle continues. Many people fight visible battles without addressing invisible forces. They change jobs, move to new cities, end relationships, or start new projects, yet carry the same patterns wherever they go. This happens because the true source of their struggles has not been revealed. Revelation acts like a mirror that shows not only the problem but also the role a person plays in sustaining it. Sometimes the greatest obstacle is not external opposition but internal resistance. Without revelation, a person may blame others for failures that originate within. Revelation also restores perspective. When people face repeated failure, they often conclude that they are cursed, unlucky, or destined to suffer. These conclusions are born out of ignorance, not truth. Revelation replaces false narratives with divine perspective. It helps a person see their situation not as destiny, but as a temporary condition that can be transformed. When perspective changes, behavior changes. And when behavior changes, outcomes change. Another powerful dimension of revelation is alignment. Many people struggle not because they lack potential, but because they are operating outside their purpose. They pursue paths that are not aligned with their gifts, values, or calling. This misalignment produces frustration, exhaustion, and repeated failure. Revelation reveals where a person truly belongs and what they are truly designed to do. When alignment is restored, effort becomes fruitful and struggle becomes meaningful progress instead of wasted energy. Revelation also exposes wrong relationships and unhealthy connections. Some cycles of failure persist because of associations that drain vision, distort values, or reinforce mediocrity. Without revelation, a person may cling to relationships that sabotage their destiny. When insight comes, they gain the courage to redefine boundaries, choose better influences, and build healthier networks. In this way, revelation does not only change internal states, it restructures external realities. Another dimension of revelation is the unveiling of spiritual laws. Many people desire supernatural results, but ignore spiritual principles. Revelation helps a person understand the laws that govern progress, favor, discipline, and growth. It reveals that success is not random and failure is not inevitable. It shows that consistent obedience to truth produces consistent victory. When these laws are understood and applied, cycles of failure are replaced by cycles of progress. Revelation is not always dramatic. Sometimes it comes as quiet awareness, sudden clarity, or deep conviction. It may come through reflection, teaching, prayer, or experience. But whenever it comes, it carries the power to disrupt stagnation. A single moment of revelation can undo years of confusion. A single insight can redirect an entire life. This is why revelation is more powerful than effort without understanding. However, revelation alone is not enough. It must be acted upon. Many people receive insight but refuse to change. They recognize the truth but remain attached to old habits, comfort zones, and familiar patterns. Revelation without obedience becomes frustration. But when revelation is embraced and applied, transformation becomes inevitable. Hidden patterns lose their secrecy, and cycles of failure lose their authority. Divine revelation is the gateway to freedom. It breaks the illusion that failure is permanent. It exposes the lies that sustain limitation. It unveils the truth that empowers change. When revelation enters a life, destiny is redefined. The same person who once struggled blindly begins to move with clarity and confidence. The same life once trapped in repetition begins to experience progress and renewal. And as revelation continues to unfold, cycles of failure are replaced by cycles of wisdom, growth, and lasting victory. Identity is the foundation upon which destiny is built. Long before success or failure manifests outwardly, it is shaped inwardly by how a person sees themselves. Many people struggle not because they lack ability or opportunity, but because their identity is disconnected from their true purpose. When identity is distorted, effort becomes misguided, decisions become confused, and progress becomes inconsistent. Aligning identity with divine purpose is therefore one of the most powerful steps toward ending cycles of failure and establishing lasting victory. A person's identity is formed through experiences, words, environments, and beliefs. From childhood, people absorb messages about who they are and what they can become. Some grow up hearing words of affirmation, encouragement, and vision. Others grow up surrounded by criticism, fear, and limitation. Over time, these messages become internal voices. When a person internalizes negative definitions of themselves, they unconsciously limit their potential. They may dream of greatness, but their identity whispers that they are not worthy, not capable, or not destined for success. When identity is misaligned, people pursue goals that do not reflect their true calling. They chase recognition instead of purpose, comfort instead of growth, and approval instead of authenticity. This misalignment produces frustration. A person may achieve certain things yet feel empty, restless, or dissatisfied. They may succeed externally but fail internally. This is because success without identity alignment does not bring fulfillment. It only amplifies confusion. Aligning identity with divine purpose begins with awareness. A person must first realize that they are not defined by past failures, family limitations, or societal expectations. They are defined by a higher design. When this realization dawns, it breaks the psychological chains of inferiority and fear. A person begins to see themselves not as a victim of circumstances, but as a carrier of purpose. This shift in identity changes everything: how they think, how they speak, how they choose, and how they respond to challenges. Identity alignment also requires the renewal of the mind. Many people want to change their lives but refuse to change their thinking. They desire new results while holding on to old beliefs. But transformation does not occur without mental renewal. When a person begins to replace limiting beliefs with empowering truths, they unlock new possibilities. They stop saying, "This is how my life has always been," and begin to declare, "This is not my final story." Such declarations are not mere optimism. They are expressions of a renewed identity. Another crucial aspect of identity alignment is accepting responsibility. When a person understands their purpose, they realize that their life is not accidental. They recognize that they have a role to play in shaping their destiny. This awareness eliminates excuses. Instead of blaming circumstances, they begin to ask, "What must I become to fulfill my purpose?" This question shifts focus from external obstacles to internal transformation. Identity alignment also influences relationships. When people do not know who they are, they often connect with people who reinforce their confusion. They tolerate toxic relationships, accept mediocrity, and fear separation from unhealthy influences. But when identity becomes clear, relationships are redefined. A person gains the courage to walk away from connections that sabotage their purpose and to build relationships that inspire growth. In this way, identity alignment not only transforms the individual, but also restructures their environment. Another dimension of identity alignment is consistency. When a person is disconnected from their purpose, they live fragmented lives. They act differently in different environments, compromise values, and pursue contradictory goals. This fragmentation weakens character and breeds instability. But when identity is aligned with purpose, life becomes unified. Decisions are guided by clear values. Actions are driven by meaningful goals. And discipline becomes natural rather than forced. Consistency replaces confusion, and stability replaces chaos. Identity alignment also affects resilience. People who do not understand who they are easily give up when they face opposition. They interpret challenges as signs of defeat. But people who are aligned with purpose interpret challenges differently. They see obstacles as training, delays as preparation, and struggles as refinement. Their identity gives them the strength to persist when others quit. They do not abandon their journey at the first sign of difficulty, because they understand that their destiny is larger than temporary setbacks. Ultimately, aligning identity with divine purpose is not a one-time event, but a continuous process. It requires constant reflection, growth, and adjustment. As a person grows, their understanding of purpose deepens, and their identity becomes more refined. With every step of alignment, cycles of failure lose their power. Confusion gives way to clarity. Insecurity gives way to confidence, and stagnation gives way to progress. When identity is aligned with purpose, life becomes intentional rather than accidental. A person stops wandering and starts building. They stop reacting and start creating. They stop repeating negative patterns and start establishing new patterns of success. And in this alignment, the greatest transformation occurs. A life once defined by limitation becomes a life defined by meaning, direction, and lasting victory. Spiritual discipline is the bridge between desire and manifestation. Many people sincerely want to break cycles of failure, yet their lives lack the structure, consistency, and obedience required to sustain change. Prayer is powerful, but prayer without discipline is unstable. Faith is essential, but faith without obedience is fragile. To end recurring patterns of defeat, a person must understand that transformation is not accidental. It is cultivated through deliberate spiritual habits and consistent alignment with truth. Prayer is not merely a religious activity. It is a process of alignment. When a person prays, they are not just speaking words. They are recalibrating their inner world to reflect divine realities. However, prayer must move beyond emotional expression to intentional engagement. Many people pray only when they are in crisis, but cycles of failure do not break through occasional prayer. They break through sustained spiritual engagement. Consistent prayer builds spiritual sensitivity, clarity, and authority. It strengthens the inner man and sharpens discernment. When prayer becomes a lifestyle rather than a reaction, it begins to reshape destiny. Obedience is another pillar of spiritual discipline. Many people ask for divine intervention while ignoring divine instructions. They seek change without submission, but obedience is the proof of genuine faith. When a person receives guidance yet refuses to act on it, they delay their own breakthrough. Sometimes the instructions are simple: change your habits, leave harmful relationships, acquire knowledge, forgive offenses, or take bold steps of faith. Yet these simple instructions are often resisted because they require sacrifice. Cycles of failure persist not because solutions are unavailable, but because obedience is postponed. Spiritual discipline also involves consistency in values and actions. Many people are spiritually active but morally inconsistent. They pray passionately yet live carelessly. They seek divine favor yet compromise integrity. This contradiction weakens spiritual authority. A person cannot expect lasting victory while living a divided life. When values align with prayers and actions align with beliefs, spiritual power is released. Consistency transforms spirituality from theory into reality. Another vital dimension of spiritual discipline is self-control. Self-control is the ability to govern desires, emotions, and impulses. Many failures are not caused by external forces, but by uncontrolled appetites and emotions. Anger destroys relationships. Impatience ruins opportunities. Laziness sabotages potential. And pride isolates destiny helpers. Without self-control, prayer becomes ineffective because the same behaviors that cause failure remain unchallenged. Spiritual discipline trains a person to respond with wisdom instead of impulse, with patience instead of frustration, and with courage instead of fear. Spiritual discipline also requires the cultivation of wisdom. Wisdom is the practical application of spiritual truth. Many people are spiritually passionate but practically foolish. They pray for financial breakthrough, yet refuse to learn financial management. They pray for healthy relationships, yet ignore principles of communication and respect. Spiritual discipline involves integrating faith with wisdom. When spiritual insight meets practical wisdom, cycles of failure are dismantled at both spiritual and structural levels. Another aspect of spiritual discipline is perseverance. Breaking cycles of failure is not an instant event. It is a process. Many people begin with enthusiasm, but abandon the journey when results are delayed. They interpret delay as denial and resistance as defeat. But perseverance is the proof of genuine transformation. A disciplined person continues to pray, obey, learn, and grow, even when results are not immediately visible. Over time, consistency produces irreversible change. Spiritual discipline also involves accountability. No one breaks cycles of failure alone. Many people remain stuck because they isolate themselves from guidance, correction, and mentorship. When a person refuses accountability, they protect their weaknesses instead of confronting them. But when they embrace accountability, they gain perspective, support, and correction. Accountability exposes blind spots that sustain failure. It transforms spiritual discipline from personal effort into collective strength. Ultimately, spiritual discipline is not about perfection, but direction. It is not about never falling, but about rising consistently. It is not about external appearance, but internal alignment. When prayer, obedience, wisdom, self-control, perseverance, and accountability become integrated into daily life, cycles of failure begin to collapse. What once seemed impossible becomes achievable. What once repeated endlessly begins to fade. Spiritual discipline does not merely end failure, it establishes new patterns of success. It replaces chaos with order, weakness with strength, and confusion with clarity. Through disciplined alignment with truth, a person moves from reacting to life to commanding outcomes. And as spiritual discipline deepens, cycles of failure are not only broken, they are permanently replaced by cycles of growth, stability, and lasting victory. Faith is not a denial of reality. It is the courage to confront reality with higher truth. Many people remain trapped in cycles of failure, not because they lack faith, but because their faith is disconnected from wisdom and strategy. Faith without wisdom becomes blind optimism, and wisdom without faith becomes empty calculation. To break negative cycles, a person must learn to unite spiritual conviction with practical intelligence. When faith and wisdom work together, failure loses its grip and progress becomes sustainable. Negative cycles often persist because people repeat the same actions while expecting different results. They pray for change but maintain the same habits, make the same decisions, and follow the same patterns. This contradiction creates stagnation. Faith must inspire new thinking, and wisdom must guide new actions. Without strategic change, prayer alone cannot dismantle structural problems. A person may pray for financial breakthrough, but if they continue to spend recklessly and avoid learning financial principles, the cycle will continue. Faith must produce new behaviors, and wisdom must shape those behaviors. Breaking negative cycles requires clarity. A person must first identify the exact patterns that need to change. Many people speak generally about failure without analyzing its structure. They say nothing works for me, but cannot identify specific habits, decisions, or influences that contribute to their struggles. Wisdom begins with observation. When a person studies their own patterns honestly, they begin to see where change is required. This awareness transforms failure from a mysterious enemy into a solvable problem. Another essential element is courage. Negative cycles often survive because people fear change. Change demands risk, sacrifice, and discomfort. It requires leaving familiar environments, redefining relationships, and abandoning comfortable habits. Many people prefer familiar pain to unfamiliar progress. But faith empowers courage. It gives a person the strength to step into uncertainty with confidence. When faith ignites courage, people begin to make bold decisions that disrupt negative patterns. Strategic action is another key factor. Wisdom is not only about knowing what is right, it is about doing what is effective. Many people know what they should do, but lack strategy. They attempt change in random, inconsistent ways. But cycles of failure are broken through deliberate, structured action. For example, a person trapped in career stagnation must not only pray, but also acquire new skills, build networks, seek mentorship, and explore opportunities strategically. Faith gives motivation, but strategy provides direction. Another dimension of breaking negative cycles is redefining priorities. Many failures persist because people invest energy in the wrong things. They spend time on distractions instead of development, entertainment instead of education, and comfort instead of growth. Wisdom helps a person distinguish between urgent and important, between pleasure and purpose. When priorities shift, outcomes shift. A person who once invested time in habits that reinforced failure begins to invest time in habits that produce success. Breaking negative cycles also requires patience. Many people want instant transformation. When results do not appear immediately, they lose hope and return to old patterns. But cycles are not broken overnight, they are dismantled gradually. Faith sustains patience, and wisdom directs progress. When a person understands that growth is a process, they stop measuring success by speed and start measuring it by consistency. Over time, small changes accumulate into massive transformation. Another powerful strategy is learning from failure instead of fearing it. Many people are ashamed of failure, so they avoid reflecting on it. But failure is a teacher. Wisdom extracts lessons from setbacks. When a person studies their failures, they discover insights that guide future success. Faith then transforms those insights into confidence rather than discouragement. Instead of saying, I failed again, they begin to say, I have learned something that will make me stronger. Breaking negative cycles also involves redefining identity. Many people identify themselves with their failures. They say, I am unlucky, I am not good at this, or people like me never succeed. These statements reinforce negative cycles. Faith challenges these identities, and wisdom replaces them with truth. When a person begins to see themselves as capable, growing, and purposeful, their actions change accordingly. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior shapes outcomes. Ultimately, breaking negative cycles through faith and wisdom is about partnership between the spiritual and the practical. Faith connects a person to higher possibilities, while wisdom equips them to actualize those possibilities. When faith inspires action and wisdom guides action, cycles of failure are replaced by cycles of progress. A person who once repeated mistakes begins to repeat victories. A life once defined by stagnation begins to be defined by growth. In this transformation, the greatest miracle is not just external success, but internal renewal. The mind becomes disciplined, the heart becomes courageous, and the will becomes focused. And as faith and wisdom continue to work together, Negative cycles do not merely end. They are replaced by new patterns of clarity, confidence, and unstoppable advancement. Divine intervention is not a myth reserved for extraordinary people. It is the natural response of higher power to alignment, faith, and persistence. Many people struggle for years because they believe their battles are purely human, solvable only by effort, intelligence, or connections. While human effort is important, there are moments in life where effort alone is insufficient. There are cycles that cannot be broken by strength, strategies that cannot succeed without favor, and doors that cannot open without supernatural influence. Activating divine intervention is the turning point where human limitations meet higher authority. Divine intervention begins with awareness of dependence. A person must first recognize that they cannot solve everything by themselves. This realization is not weakness, it is wisdom. When a person acknowledges their limitations, they create space for higher power to operate. Many people are trapped in cycles of failure because of pride. They refuse guidance, reject correction, and resist surrender. Pride isolates them from the very help they need, but humility unlocks divine involvement. When humility enters a life, assistance follows. Faith is another key to activating divine intervention. Faith is not blind belief, it is confident trust in unseen possibilities. When a person believes that change is possible, they begin to align their thoughts and actions with that belief. Faith challenges despair, confronts hopelessness, and defies negative patterns. Without faith, prayer becomes routine and effort becomes mechanical. But when faith is alive, every action becomes meaningful. Faith creates an atmosphere where intervention becomes possible. Divine intervention also requires persistence. Many people pray once and give up when nothing changes immediately. They interpret silence as absence and delay as rejection. But intervention often unfolds gradually. Persistence proves sincerity. It demonstrates that a person is not seeking temporary relief, but permanent transformation. When persistence is sustained, resistance begins to weaken. What once seemed immovable begins to shift. Another dimension of activating divine intervention is alignment with purpose. Intervention is most powerful when a person's desires are connected to meaningful purpose rather than selfish ambition. When a person seeks change, not just for personal comfort, but for growth, impact, and contribution, higher power responds with greater intensity. Purpose attracts intervention. When life is centered on purpose, struggles become meaningful and breakthroughs become inevitable. Divine intervention is also activated through gratitude. Gratitude shifts focus from what is lacking to what is already present. Many people focus exclusively on their problems and ignore their blessings. This mindset deepens frustration and blinds them to opportunities. Gratitude, however, opens perception. It helps a person recognize small victories, hidden opportunities, and subtle progress. Gratitude strengthens faith and attracts favor. When gratitude becomes a lifestyle, intervention becomes more visible. Another crucial element is obedience to inner guidance. Many people pray for intervention but ignore intuitive nudges, convictions, and insights. These inner signals are often the channels through which intervention operates. When a person obeys these subtle instructions, they position themselves for breakthroughs. Sometimes intervention does not come as dramatic miracles, but as timely ideas, unexpected connections, or strategic opportunities. Those who are attentive to guidance recognize intervention in ordinary moments. Divine intervention also involves transformation of character. Many people want their circumstances to change, but resist personal change. They pray for success, but avoid discipline, seek favor, but reject responsibility, and desire recognition, but avoid preparation. But intervention often begins internally. When character evolves, circumstances follow. Higher power often changes the person before changing the situation. This internal transformation prepares a person to sustain external breakthroughs. Another aspect of intervention is community. Many people isolate themselves in times of struggle, believing they must fight alone. But intervention often comes through people. Mentors, friends, partners, and helpers can become instruments of divine assistance. When a person is open to connection and collaboration, they create channels through which help can flow. Isolation closes doors that community opens. Ultimately, activating divine intervention is not about manipulating supernatural forces. It is about aligning with higher principles. It is about living with humility, faith, persistence, purpose, gratitude, obedience, character, and connection. When these elements come together, intervention becomes inevitable. Cycles of failure begin to break, not gradually but decisively. What once seemed impossible becomes reality. In the moment of intervention, history is rewritten. A life once defined by stagnation becomes a testimony of transformation. A destiny once trapped in repetition enters a new cycle of progress, favor, and fulfillment. And as intervention continues to unfold, a person realizes a profound truth. They were never abandoned to failure. They were simply waiting for the moment when alignment would invite higher power to take over. Every cycle of failure ends where understanding, alignment, and faith begin. What once appeared as destiny is now revealed as a pattern that can be confronted, challenged, and transformed. You have seen that repeated struggles are not accidents, but signals pointing to deeper roots. You have discovered that revelation brings clarity, identity brings direction, discipline brings stability, wisdom brings strategy, and divine intervention brings decisive change. When these forces come together, no pattern of defeat can survive. Your life is not designed for endless repetition of pain, delay, or frustration. You are not created to move in circles while your destiny waits ahead. The moment you begin to apply truth, your story begins to change. The moment you align your mind, actions, and spirit with higher principles, you step out of confusion into purpose. Cycles do not break by chance. They break when courage replaces fear, when wisdom replaces ignorance, and when faith replaces doubt. Remember this: transformation is not instant, but it is inevitable when you remain consistent. Every disciplined action, every courageous decision, every act of obedience, and every moment of persistence contributes to the collapse of negative patterns. Even when progress seems slow, something is shifting beneath the surface. The seeds you plant today will become the victories you celebrate tomorrow. As you move forward, refuse to accept failure as your identity. Refuse to accept limitation as your destiny. Refuse to accept repetition as your future. Instead, embrace growth, clarity, and purpose. Let your life become proof that cycles can be broken and new patterns can be established. From this moment, may your journey be defined not by repeated defeat, but by repeated victory. May confusion give way to wisdom, weakness to strength, and delay to acceleration. And as you walk in alignment with truth and purpose, may every cycle of failure end and a new cycle of success, favor, and fulfillment begin in your life.